Times, Charter California edition. My name is Brad Palmer. We are in Redding today in Shasta County, part of our roadshow. It's my pleasure to welcome back Leonard Moty. He is the chair of the Shasta County Board of Supervisors. This is God's country. You just can't deny it.
No.
I mean, you are so lucky to have lived here, grown up here. You're a native son. You were police chief. You're now on the Board of Supervisors, the chair. How does that feel?
It feels great to be able to stay in the city you grew up in,
Right.
and as you mentioned, we have such great amenities around here. You can never get away from them.
And let's talk about some of those natural amenities, the surroundings. I mean, outside, beautiful Sacramento River, trees on the other side. But as you go up a little farther, you see the green forest. But I have learned that green forest is becoming brown. It's becoming brown because of the drought. You, as more of an expert than I, what can you tell us about what's happening with the foliage, the green forest in North State and otherwise?
Well, it's certainly, even as the governor mentioned, you have in the Sierra Nevadas, there's no snow where there should be 5 feet of snow. And because of that, things are going to turn brown very quickly with the lack of rain.
And I mean, the governor was very clear. I guess there was a snowpack assessment on April 1st. We are 5% of normal. 5%. I mean, it's spooky.
It is, and the first thing people worry about is, of course, is our water supply,
Right.
which they should. But beyond that is what's going to happen to our forests when there isn't enough water to keep things green and growing.
And let's talk more about the forests. Of all places, the Washington Post, I saw, ran an article about the forests in the state of California. And to date, they've estimated through the U.S. Forest Service, that was who they were quoting, 12.5 million trees have died during this drought.
And all that does is load up the forest for forest fires. And we saw some of those last year. We are so ripe for a catastrophic fire this year because of the disease and the insects that have infected the trees that have killed them. They're just laying there ready to be torched. And their part has happened is our forests have become so poorly managed over the last 50 years. We have a tremendous problem with overgrowth of the trees being so close together. They don't grow properly.
And you remember the rim fire from a couple of years ago.
Yes.
I mean, that was just devastating. I actually, sir, was on a plane while the rim fire was burning. I mean, it was scary.
And that's what the rest of California could be in a
Right.
heartset. It's just because of what's happening. And it used to be that we had fires that took care of this. Well, then over the last 100 years, we've done a lot better at suppressing fires.
But let's talk about that, because I have learned, I'm a wealth of irrelevant information, but I have learned that the whole Smokey the Bear campaign, which really invested in this notion of fire suppression, sometimes you may just want to let the fires go a bit.
It's true. And because we haven't done that, we've allowed these forests to become so overcrowded. One thing that sort of offset that for a lot of years, for 50 years, was the timber industry. But the harvesting of the trees kept our forests a little bit thinned out, so when those fires did come, you could survive them a little bit better. But now we don't cut the trees anymore. Very few. In fact, here's the amazing fact for you.
Please.
Let's say that there's 1 million board feet of new growth every year in California, new growth of trees, 1 million board feet. We harvest less than 10% of the new growth. So you're adding 90% more growth to the forest every year.
So in your mind, sir, has the pendulum on, I guess, against the timber industry swung too far?
Yes, it really has. And we cannot harvest the way we did 50 years ago, the major clear cutting. We understand that. But we can get in and do a much better job of thinning out our trees and actually putting our communities back to work. That's the part that people forget about, the social economic effects to these small communities that lived on the timber industry. And of course, when they lose the jobs, you lose the monies for the schools, the families can't stay there anymore.
It's interesting. It's almost counterintuitive right now to think we should be harvesting trees, but it's, as what you're describing, apparently not. And so how do you, as a leader in North State, explain to the rest of the state why the timber industry is part of the solution?
Well, what we're trying to do is meet with our congressmen at the federal level and explain to them and get their support in bringing the timber harvesting back to some of our communities. We're also working with the Forest Service to try to get their help and assistance. And they understand it, I think, to a degree, maybe not as much as they did maybe 50 years ago. But they're dealing with a lot of the environmental lawsuits too, which people have used as a sledgehammer to beat the timber industry down. But you're right, it's too far now. They beat them down too far.
Here's the challenge you face, and it's a constant challenge for North State, is that North State, geographically large, not as many people living here, so less representation in Sacramento, and in Washington for that matter. And so it becomes a challenge to try to educate with your point of view. Again, what I'm hearing is that you're not for clear cutting the forest, you're for seeing timber as part of the solution.
Yes, and what I would advocate for is cutting 50% of the new growth every year, of the added board feet every year. We're actually at the point, California imports lumber for our needs. Yet we've got these tremendous forests out there that are being overgrown, being burned up with catastrophic fires, which is just a waste of the material, plus it pollutes our air, plus it cuts down on our water supply. We could increase our water supply easily by 10% if we better managed our forests.
So what do you need to do? Is this a county solution, a state solution, a federal solution?
I think it's partly state, but more importantly, it's federal.
Oh, really?
Because most of it is federal lands.
Okay.
And we need to get the federal government to realize that they do a better job being better stewards of the forest.
Well, my guess is your congressman, Mr. LaMalfa, probably aligns with your views. So how do you then, who is it, the Department of Interior? Is it the Forest Service?
I think it is the agriculture
or it's ag, I guess, as well,
over the forest,
right?
And our congressman, but I actually belong on the county's behalf to a group that has 20 different counties in Northern California, plus 6 or 7 counties now from Oregon, one from Reno, one from Idaho.
Come on, that's just part of the state of Jefferson. You're just trying to, I jest. You're just trying to create a framework for Jefferson.
No, not today.
Not today, I jest.
But that group is trying to give a broader voice to the concerns of the state of Oregon, Idaho, Washington, because it's the West Coast that's being eaten alive by the loss of their forests and the loss of jobs that go with it, and the loss of the water that's being used up in the forest through the brush and undergrowth that grows so thick, and that water's not coming down the streams to where we need it in our cities. So the people in the rest of California, how do you convince them? You let them know that you can get more water. We're in a drought, major drought. You can get more water, and all those wood products that you use throughout your house and your daily lives comes from where? Right now, you're getting it from Canada.
Really? I know that the assembly member for this area, Brian Dolly, has taken some of his friends from Southern California on these tours to show the rest of the state what North State's about. Looking at timber, looking at water, looking at dams. I don't know if you've been a part of that or aware of that, but do you think that the education has begun on these issues?
I have met with Brian on a couple occasions, been up with the group. I think it's great. It's a real eye-opener for them to see the part of the state they have never been around. I think
Which is a shame, by the way, because Redding and Shasta County is really a jewel. It's a jewel.
And it's different from the other parts of the state. And I think he's done a great job of helping spread the word that we all need to be in the same boat working together. There's certain issues in other parts of the state that we need to help with.
Of course.
But we need to be more together solving issues rather than us against them.
So how are you doing? How are your constituents doing in the face of this drought, which is impacting our forests?
They are very concerned. I mean, they are very concerned about the lack of water that's available for just household use. People having major cutbacks. It's going to have a tremendous impact on our region over the next few years.
He is Leonard Moty. He is the chair of the Board of Supervisors in Shasta County. My name is Brad Palmer. It's coming to you from Redding, Starter, California edition.